Welcome to Meaningful Mondays with the Community Foundation of Middlesex County, where we only know good people who do great things in our community. Whether you are a volunteer, a donor, or a nonprofit organization, each episode of Meaningful Mondays will celebrate you, our friends and neighbors who have a deep passion for and commitment to improving the quality of life for all in Middlesex County. So let's kick off the week with great conversations with remarkable people, businesses, and nonprofits making a difference right in our own backyard. Well, welcome, everybody, to Meaningful Mondays in Middlesex County. And we are just delighted, as you know, to have good people who do great things on these podcasts. Well, actually, the Community Foundation of Middlesex County only knows good people who do great things. And I am delighted to have Kierstin, Sieser, the Regional Chief Development Officer, and Lynn Fairfield-Sonn, our favorite person, who is the Senior Regional Philanthropy Office from the American Red Cross. So welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And you know, Lynn, when you stopped in over the holidays, or when we had a phone conversation, I learned so much more than, and I thought I know it all. We're pretty nosy here at the Community Foundation. So this is your time to really educate all of us and state beyond the obvious. I think we know you do X, you do Y, you do Z. But what I learned, let's multiply that. And you've done A through Z and then some. So Lynn, I'll start with you. State the obvious, just in case anybody's new and they don't know what the American Red Cross does and what your mission is. And we'll go from local to national, because that's really where I learned so much from you, Lynn. And then Kierstin, we are certainly going to have you jump right in.
So thank you, Cynthia, and thank you. We have a wonderful relationship with the Community Foundation of Middlesex County. You've all been so terrific to work with, and you've supported our mission, particularly the one that we do in Middlesex County. So the goal and the mission of the American Red Cross is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. And we do that through the generosity of our donors and the power of our volunteers, because most people do not realize that for every one staff member, there are at least 90 volunteers who respond to disasters, to service to the armed forces, help with blood drives, and provide training services. So that was, I think, one of the aspects that you didn't realize until I had dropped in and we started talking about the different services we offer.
Well, and Kierstin, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, you've summed it up beautifully, Lynn, but I do think it's like, let's remind folks about the local partnerships that you also have, because you do, those are the behind the scene things that you can't put on a flyer. You just have to talk to somebody.
Absolutely. So, and we can both speak to this, but we provide I'll start with blood. We provide about 41% of the nation's blood supply. And we do that through partnerships with religious organizations, community centers, towns, cities. So, and our donors themselves, who are gracious enough to open their doors, and that's where we do blood drives. So that's just one aspect of the partnerships that keep the Red Cross moving locally. But multiply that for all of our lines of service. So Lynn mentioned service to the armed forces. So right. We are there for every part of the journey. So when somebody enlists in the military, to before they deploy, we work with their families, to when perhaps they're overseas and they have some news that needs to be delivered. We provide that communication to that soldier or sailor. And we do that as well through partnerships with local military organizations, through our VA. We're also working at the VA to make sure that when there are military members that are receiving care there, they feel that they are not alone, is one aspect of that. And also we're there to offer our services. So
No,
that's just two examples.
Right.
no,
And-
no,
and-
and go ahead, Lynn, and then I'm going
Oh,
to tell you what I'm
So
thinking
I
with
was going
my
to talk about our
arms.
disaster relief, which I think
Yeah.
most people assume that is our main mission, which it is one of our 5 missions, as I like to say. We respond to emergencies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they're particularly in the Middlesex County area, they tend to be home fires. And those are the most horrific, unexpected emergencies many families face. And what is one of our strengths is that we arrive on the scene with the first responders, and our goal is to provide comfort and care to make sure they have a place to stay that night, that they have their medications, they have their eyeglasses, that they have food, and that they know there's a path forward. And many times it's just a hug and a blanket and a stuffed animal for a child. But those, many times that's what makes the difference when
I'll tell you why I'm smiling, because my arms were going before you started speaking. It sounds like you provide this warm blanket and a big hug around the community. So,
and they'll do it 24/7
Right.
in so many different neighborhoods. You may or may not see us deliver our mission, but we're there. We are there.
It's
and
true.
I
Many home fires are happening late at night, and our volunteers are taking that phone call and they're going to that home, as Lynn said, most times at the same time as the fire, as that local fire department, as the emergency responders. And so, and we're providing that comfort and care. Sometimes that's also financial assistance. If that home is considered, they can't go back to it, the damage is too much,
right.
then our financial assistance is activated as well.
And
So
and we pretty much provide, I would say, for most of the families we respond to, we do provide lodging. And on the
Yes.
spot, we will make a hotel reservation for them to immediately go to.
So I'm going to use the word reactive, because those are reactive things, but you also, and very critical, and I'm using
Yes.
the term, but I'm impressed that there are also proactive things that you do to prevent you having to react and your volunteers having to react in the middle of the night. So can one of you talk to me about that?
Home fire campaign.
Yes, we love it. And we will invite you, Cynthia, to come out with us and install smoke alarms, because it's such a rewarding experience to leave a home and know that you've made that family safer.
And emergency plans?
Yes, because we
Yes.
don't just install smoke alarms. While we typically have 2 or 3 volunteers who go, and 1 or 2 will install them, and the third volunteer will work with the family to talk about different safety things that they need to consider. Do not put extension cords. Do not put appliances in extension cords. Plug them directly into the outlet. Have a safe space so that if there is a fire,
Right.
where is your family going to meet, so that you don't send fire personnel into the home thinking you're lost? Because if one child is in the left-hand neighbor and the other child is at the right-hand neighbor, and you don't know where they are, you assume they're still in the home. So that is the kind of planning that we do with families and residents when we do install our smoke alarms. So it's, as you say, it's proactive versus reactive.
Yes.
Right. And so that's the local level. And what impressed me, and I honestly say, Lynn, when you told me, I was floored about how the chapters work across the country to leverage the specific resources and expertise that a chapter might have. And I hate to bring up the California fires, but that is just on so many people's minds. So, Lynn, tell me a little bit about, you shared a resource that's right over the river in Lyme.
There's one of our volunteers who has virtually deployed to provide assistance to those who were looking to see if their loved ones were safe.
That's the
So
one. So I'm
Yes.
sorry, I didn't mean to throw
yeah,
you.
no. I was trying to remember which one.
The family reunification
Thank you,
service.
Kirsten. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Um,
And if I recall correctly, and I think she was in the news. Forgive me, we will try to figure out her name at the end of this.
yeah.
But she's an expert in this and really is known nationwide and deployed from your chapter to help in that situation.
So interestingly enough, we do work across regions, and Kierstin, feel free to chime in as I try to, because Kierstin actually was in California, so she'll speak to a little bit more
So
of that.
really, and tell us all about that experience.
So when there is a horrific level 7 disaster, such as the California wildfires, they first pull resources from that end of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Except that each chapter tends to have someone who is an expert in a particular area. So there was one of our volunteers who is considered a national expert on mass shelter, and she literally took off the Wednesday, like the fires happened Tuesday night.
Yep.
She was in the air on Wednesday to fly in to help them shelter and set up and shelter and organize mass shelters, excuse me, so that we were ready for the residents that were going to be coming in. And then we have someone who's just got deployed this week, who's a computer technological whiz, and and Kierstin will speak more to this, but we're providing direct financial assistance to families who lost their homes or or they were destroyed. And so he is helping IT deliver those funds or whatever services they need virtually to get them into their bank accounts or, whatever kind of computer expertise you need for that.
So, Lynn, thank you very much for explaining, how everybody across the country may have a particular person who's an expert. And thank you for sharing the information about the IT person. And then Lynn told me, Kierstin, that you were deployed to California. So can you explain that experience?
Absolutely. Thank you. So unfortunately, we had members of our own development team, so our fundraising team in California that were impacted personally. We always, need extra hands when it comes to a disaster that size, particularly because there's so much outreach from the community, so
Right.
much generosity, and people have items that they want to donate or they want to start a fundraiser. So you're already dealing with this really mass incoming of outreach. But on top of that, to have just the true suffering of your own team members and then people close to you who have lost their homes or can't return. So the call came out from one of my managers saying, looking for a CDO that can go to California to help support the CDO there. And I was like, I just felt called to, as this happens. And yeah, and I was on a plane a couple days later, working with the team. There was another fundraiser as well that deployed to help. And so it's everything from reaching out to donors to we also had partners who had multiple employees, that were also impacted. So working with them, how can we connect them to resources quickly? So yeah, it's pretty amazing to be on the ground and see an operation of that size and see how all the pieces work together.
Right.
And not just the Red Cross pieces, but all of our partners as well on the ground.
Because community partners really step in and we all work together to make sure that we help those who are impacted by a wildfire, hurricane, or a flood, because that's where the strength of community comes into play.
You can't do it alone. And then it's funny because every time we do one of the podcasts lately, we're getting this new math where 1+1 = 3. And that came from a banker. And so, the multiplier effect, the ripple effect. But it is true. And Lynn, you just said it so well. It's what community is all about. And everybody understands that by partnering, you can get a lot more done than just trying to do it by yourself.
Well, the other thing, so there's two other things to mention, is that if, God forbid, something happens near our region, we know that we have resources coming from other parts of the country. And the second thing is when our volunteers or our staff deploy to help the other regions who are experiencing these awful and horrific incidents. When they come back, they bring best practices, right? So
Yeah.
they help us prepare as an organization and a community to better respond should something like that happen to us. So it's a win-win. The other thing I wanted to mention is no volunteer goes out to respond to either a home fire or a disaster without training. So they are not only trained in the skills necessary to do mass sheltering or feeding or whatever the particular skill is, but they're also trained in what I call sensitivity, because clearly these times
Oh
are
my
so
gosh.
tragic for those who've
Right.
experienced. So you have to bring a certain amount of empathy and understanding with you as you use your skills. So no volunteer goes without training, and that's an important part of the Red Cross.
Absolutely. And we do have specialized volunteer positions for spiritual care, for mental health care. And those roles are so critical for any disaster, whether it's an individual disaster like a home fire, but in particular for these large scale disasters where the trauma is ongoing and very you very intense.
So, Lynn, I'll turn it over to you. I mean, so you get the training before you're deployed. What happens during the downtime? So, and hopefully there is downtime for you as staff and for your volunteers. How do you prepare? Because you don't want to be taken off guard. And it sounds like you have a massive plan, a master plan for training everyone. So could you let us know a little bit about that?
So what many people don't understand is that we are mandated by Congress to respond to disasters, and we provide mass shelter and mass care. So that, and it's an unfunded mandate. So when we respond to home fires or hurricanes or wildfires, most people do not understand we do not get state or federal money. All of the money is raised by the generosity of the American public, corporate, individuals, foundations. People really rally to help us. And because of their generosity and our incredible volunteers, we can respond to these disasters. So one of the things we do is planning. So in Connecticut, each region, and we have 5 regions, respond and prepare in their quote downtime. Although honestly, Cynthia, we haven't had downtime in
No.
about
I was
years.
just going to say that was a euphemism. So
Yes.
But
I'm
the
just
preparation,
I'm
yeah.
hoping you have some downtime because it's got to be stressful on you and your volunteers not to have it. We need you to take care of yourselves.
Well, and that's where the Red Cross is really good, because the volunteers take care of each other, the staff. I mean,
Right.
it's a
We all
tremendous
take care of
supporter.
each other. Yes.
We really do. That being said, there are designated shelters put into place so that should a large incident happen, there's already shelter locations organized. There are trailers with cots and first aid kits and all the supplies that you need that are deployed into different parts of Connecticut that can go immediately to those shelters and begin to set up. We have feeding contracts in place so that if, God forbid, there is a large incident, we've already identified those who are going to step up and are going to help us feed the 500 to 1,000 to whatever we have in a shelter, because you got to feed them and
Yes.
you've got to make sure that they're safe. What am I missing, Kierstin?
No, that's right. It's now that we've told you this, Cynthia, you'll probably notice the Red Cross trailers at certain places. Like I was driving by a school the other day. I said, "Yep, there's one of our trailers." As Lynn said, that's, it's strategically placed so we can get those items in the case of emergency to a shelter to the people who need
Well,
them.
I'm
And we
so glad you're sharing what you do because we never want to take for granted what you do in your volunteers. It's like when the electricity goes out and you can't flick a switch and get light. You're really that's when you know I've
Yep.
taken something for granted, and we don't want that to happen. And Lynn, you
Well,
had something else to add?
yeah, we work so well. Yes, I should say we work so well with our community, the town emergency managers, social workers, fire departments, police departments, first responders. Kudos to both our staff and our volunteers who really work to make sure that we have great relationships with them. And they are so helpful to us in saying, think about this, don't think about that. They also are the great partners in pre-positioning our trailers and supplies. Like we work together to determine where the best location is.
What would you say to somebody who might be thinking about volunteering? How do they reach out to the chapter? Where should they go to find out more information?
So if they go to redcross.org, it's very simple. And there's, I think right on our homepage, they can click on the volunteer aspect.
Right.
And they'll be putting in their zip code, so they will be routed to their closest chapter. And it will ask them some questions, and they'll register in our system, but then somebody personally is going to reach out to them and they're going to find out, okay, what are your interests? What's your availability? And they'll really work with them to find the best placement. So that might not be getting up at 3 a.m. responding to a home fire for some folks. Perhaps they're still working. Perhaps there's, that's not something that's going to work in their schedule, but there's so many opportunities. As Lynn said, blood ambassadors at our blood drives. We have volunteers on our development team. We have volunteers working in volunteer services to recruit more volunteers. But I would be remiss to say, what we're trying to build our capacity right now with our disaster response volunteers locally. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to anybody, we would really, they can also reach out to Lynn or myself, and we'll be happy to share our information, and we can get them to the correct person.
And as you point out, there's mental health. We have a lot of retired mental health professionals or social workers who also work with the Red Cross, again, to respond during disasters or after disasters, because for every family or resident that experiences a disaster, we do follow up over the next week or two to make sure that they have the resources available, that they know the different places they can turn for help. Many times it's with us, many times it's with the towns or with other nonprofits. It could be simple things like getting your prescription renewed or finding, how do I get new eyeglasses, or things that you may have lost in a fire or a flood. And so there's a variety of different volunteer positions. Blood ambassadors are so critical. There's no such thing as artificial blood. If human donors don't donate, we don't have a blood supply.
Lynn, I learned something new from you every time I talk to you. So as I'm listening to you, I envision, and I am a visual person, there's this huge network and overlay, both here in Connecticut, locally in the towns. The networks are expanding, and then nationally. So I have to tell you, I feel really comfortable now that I've talked to both of you about what you do, and I do appreciate it more now than ever.
Well, and the Community Foundation is part of our family too,
Yes.
because you have been very supportive, and that's what the community is all about, right? Making sure that we're all responding and helping people who really are experiencing some tragic situations in their life.
Absolutely. And that warm hug,
The warm hug.
That's who you are.
That's it.
So, and everybody needs that now more than ever. So I so appreciate it. Ladies, you have impressed me with what you do. I'm wondering now what I do every day, but compared to what you do. So let's just take a step back and think about some downtime. What are you looking forward to in the next couple of months? Kierstin?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm really looking forward to, right now we're really trying to expand our community partnerships, and we're taking that readiness, I say, to the next level. We gave it a name, because sometimes when you give something a name, it allows people to rally around it and get excited. And so it's community mobilization. It's making sure we have the right partnerships in place. We're having the right conversations. If we're in a room, for example, and we notice somebody is not at the table, it's all of our responsibilities to bring those people to the table. And so over the next, this is a long, continuous project, obviously, but over the next 6 months, I'm really excited that we're going to make some major strides in this direction, and including in Middlesex County and also in Hartford. So
Oh,
very
well,
excited.
6 months. I only asked for the next couple, but you gave me 6. That's really great, Kierstin. Thank you. And Lynn, how about you?
Think that I'm looking forward to over the next few months continuing the work that I am blessed to be able to do, working with community foundations and different organizations who really do support our mission. You're right. You always learn something new from me because I'm just so darn passionate about the mission of the organization, because it is important to have people there when you need them.
And for us to understand behind the scenes and not take you or any nonprofit, because every nonprofit has so many layers to it. So, I love nonprofits. So we really appreciate all that you do. I can't thank you enough for what you do. And Meaningful Mondays go on forever in our world. So thank you so much for being with us. And you just made my day. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
inviting
you.
us.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
It's great.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Meaningful Mondays. At the Community Foundation of Middlesex County, we know that philanthropy matters and philanthropy works. Together, we support the arts, education, human services, animal welfare, the environment, heritage enhancements, and so much more by providing services, programs, and grants to our local nonprofits. We invite you to learn more and share your passion with us. Visit us at middlesexcountykcf.org or contact us at 860-347-0025. Together, we can make great things happen.